don't trust your feelings. And by feelings, I mean your emotions. When you experience something, right, there's a outside trigger, and then that trigger creates a response in our body. Maybe it's through your senses, what you see or hear, you smell or taste, or something bumps up against you, something you physically experience. And then you react to that stimulus, right? Well, not actually that stimulus. We react to the meaning that we make from the sense making of that experience, of what's just happened outside of us. So outside of my body, it could be something someone said, or a scenario, particularly something happening, like say with my child. And here's where I get to this point of, so in that moment, perhaps my child says something, perhaps so my boy says something, or it's how he says it, or it's what's happening in front of me. And I'm calibrating, right? So I'm looking in and observing, and I'm measuring. Is this good? Is this bad? Is this right? Is this wrong? Like, what does this say about me? There's a whole bunch of stuff happening in that moment. And each one of those ideas, which is a thought in response to what I'm calibrating, what I'm observing and measuring, that thought elicits or invites me to experience an emotion. And that emotion could be frustration, it could be anger, it could be disappointment, it could be excitement. But all of those are happening at the same time in this moment. And very quickly, before I can recognize, before I'm consciously aware of it, I'm no longer in the moment, right? I'm no longer innocently observing what's happening in front of me, just as one man looking at one child and just seeing their behavior. I can't even see. I really need to be conscious to slow what's happening down enough, like if I had a time dial, to slow it all down so that I could see specifically the difference between the behavior in front of me and what's been said and the meanings that I make. And as I say this, I'm reminded of another podcast I was listening to where they asked, I think it was Agassi, to explain how he gets ready for tennis. Forget the name. Let's just say, so a famous tennis player, before I get that wrong, is invited to explain how he gets ready for a shot. He's like, yeah, no, I've got it. I know exactly how. I've got this whole thing planned out. However, when they listened to the words that he used to describe, and they compared it to a video, like a video of a typical behavior, even there at that level, there wasn't an exact match, which tells me that sometimes I'm not consciously aware of what I'm doing, even when I think I'm thinking about it. And in a similar way, I might not be consciously aware, accurately aware of what's going on in front of me, even when I think I'm looking at it. Specifically, how many times I have not been accurate in my assessment, in my observation, in the sense making of what's been happening in front of me in the container of the relationship with my son and I, even when I think I'm hearing exactly what's been said, I'm seeing what's happening, even when I think I'm there. Now, I'm physically there, yes, and I'm not suggesting your feelings aren't true or true to you. My feelings are my feelings. Those emotions are real, and each one of those emotions is a reaction to something I see, or a thought in my mind, the meaning that I make to what I experience. And all of those are subjective, and they're real, it's truth. However, all of them, or rather each of them, also create this other energy in my system, in my mind, body, emotion system, this emotion, this emoting. And these feelings, man, that's like sometimes they can have a life of their own. And with each of those feelings, I create a meaning. So it's like a layer. If I'm happy, I can layer excitement on top of that happiness. But if I'm frustrated, if my child is speaking to me in a way that is unfamiliar or like uncomfortable or not what I'm expecting, I can have that surprise. I can layer that surprise with a judgment of disappointment. And when I'm experiencing the disappointment on that surprise, that disappointment can feel heavy. It can feel another layer of almost like anger or frustration. And I don't know if you can see how quickly a moment, a simple, innocent moment in front of me, can escalate into something quite different, to something quite else, quite other. So it's no longer just dad chatting to my lad. Now there's these other things going on in this kind of, say, if I can say, the space between us. And that's why I suggest that sometimes I shouldn't trust my feelings. And I'm not saying that they're not real. They are my feelings and I feel that way. However, they are perhaps clouding the meanings that I'm making, or perhaps they're creating a cloud for me to see what's really going on right in front of me. Specifically because the other person in that relationship, in that relating, my child, has his own experiences, has his own emotions and his own map of the world, and he too is making sense even in that same interaction. And perhaps not wrong or right, but perhaps we're not making the same sense, and perhaps it's because we're genetically similar. Like there's some of me in him, and there's some of my thinking and some of my ways, even some of my looks. Doesn't mean that we have exactly the same map. And even if we're working from similar maps, he's in a different space in his life journey, and he's creating his own experience, and in that experience he's making sense for himself and he's making his own meanings. And we can have a very similar experience. We can see the same things and hear the same things, and use the same words. And we can have very different emotional experiences, even in the same moment, in the same container. And that difference is enough to allow for a gap in expectation, or a gap in experience, and a gap in understanding. And too often, I've trusted my feelings. I've listened to my emotions as a calibration, as a fair judgment or an accurate judgment of what's going on. And as I become aware of, hey, there's more going on in the space between my boy and I'm able to allow things to slow down. And almost in a sense, I give myself permission for me to be me and for my boy to be my boy. Or if I was saying, like, hey, you do you and I'll do me. And as I allow you to do you, dude, hey, maybe I can understand you a bit. I can access grace and understanding. And in that grace and understanding, it's like I can dial that time machine again, right? And just slow things down. And as I slow things down and open up the moment, a couple of things happen. One is I come back into the present. I can be here now and just see it for what it is, the words or the behavior or the body. And if I'm here now, I'm not racing back into my past by emotional hijacks or flashbacks, and I'm not trying to secure the future. I'm not trying to mind read and like either create a future or prevent a future if I do worst case thinking. But I can just be here now. And as I slow things down, sometimes, quite often, I can experience, maybe this might resonate with you, that the emotion, the feeling that I had in the beginning of the moment, or at the height, the peak of the moment, it's like the ocean. That the energy in motion of that emotion can also like settle, like a wave just passes through. As the wave passes, as time passes through that moment, that wave, that energy can settle. And perhaps another one will come through. So what was surprise can rise up into frustration and rise up into anger, and perhaps then just rise up into disappointment, and over time can rise up into understanding and even into grace. And in grace, connection and love. So, feel your feelings. All emotions are welcome. As one of my mentors says, not all behaviors are helpful, but all emotions are welcome. And give them time. Give yourself time to feel what you feel. But don't trust it, that first feeling or that intense, that one, to maybe be, perhaps it's not the most accurate expression or most accurate pool of data to measure or to find meaning of what's really going on in the scenario. And as you give yourself time, perhaps more meaning will come. And as you find more meaning, richer meanings, perhaps you can really upgrade the quality of the relating with you and your child. And as you do that, dude, as you slow things down and honor the emotion, honor the feelings, yours and your child's, you can become a better dad. My name's Robin. This is the Visible Felt Dad, and we'll chat again soon.